right, very good. Therefore, I shall call to order this meeting of the North County Transit District Executive Committee of October 7th, 2021. And before we begin, I would like to inform members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. And you must also register with the clerk by sending an email to clerk@nctd.org with a name and or phone number and which item you would like to speak on. And with that, Anthony, please call roll.
Yes, sir. Chair Krantz.
Here.
Vice Chair Edson.
Edson here.
Municipal Committee Chair Quirk.
Here.
PAF Committee Vice Chair Jenkins. And she may have just connected. And PAF Committee Vice Chair Jenkins.
Here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anthony will now provide a safety briefing and review evacuation procedures.
Yes, sir. For those here in the building, in the event of an emergency, I'll dial 911. In the event of an evacuation, please exit the building using the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once clear of the building, please do not re-enter unless told to do so by emergency personnel. We have fire extinguishers and fire alarms on each floor of this building. We also have a portable defibrillator located on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief, sir.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments for today?
We do not, sir.
All right. There are two agenda items, and Lori Winfrey, the General Counsel, will review agenda item number 1, which is to review proposed modifications to the NCTD board policies.
Thank you, Board Chair Krantz, and good afternoon to the rest of the committee members. I just wanted to briefly go over some of the proposed revisions to the board policies today and seek some feedback from the executive committee members. Anthony, are you advancing the slides for me? Thank you. So pursuant to board policy number 1, we do review the existing board policies on an annual basis and determine whether there's any modifications that need to be made. Most of the proposed revisions that we'll review today are not substantive in nature, and they're related to administrative, legal, or regulatory revisions. By administrative, I mean there might be a typo or something of that nature, or there is a change in a staff position name or something of that nature. And then, of course, legal or regulatory speaks for itself. So on the next slide, you will see I've separated them out by the board policy number that we're requesting that the executive committee review for advancement to the full board for consideration and approval. Where the designator is an A, it's an administrative, and so there's no comment. And then for legal and regulatory, I've provided some brief comments there, but very generally, board policies 1 through 6 just had some administrative changes. Board policy number 8, which is the conflict of interest code, there's an update to the list of designated positions that are required to report economic interest. As it relates to board policies 11, 12, and 15, those all have some slight legal modifications that are requested. As for 11 and 12, that's related to the addition of the new Surplus Land Act requirements. And in board policy 15, we had some slight revisions to the retention schedule. On the following page, we are requesting some administrative changes to the board policies indicated there, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, as well as 23. And then as it relates to board policy 22, we have requested a modification to this policy just to add in a note that makes clear that any major service changes that are advanced for review and approval by the board would need to go through a Title VI analysis. On the next page, you'll see we had an update to the list of safety-sensitive positions, the non-FTA NCTD safety-sensitive positions for Board Policy 24. Board Policy 26, we have updated the list of protected categories just to align with some modifications in the law in terms of the way things are characterized. Board Policy 27 is a non-substantive administrative change, but just updated the summary of the policy to make it clear what NCTD's policy statement is on EEO. For Board Policies 31 and 32, those were simply administrative changes. I think we are updating the title of Board Policy 32. It was originally titled just Threshold for Disproportionate Burden. We're adding in on low income populations, so it's clear what that policy relates to. Board Policy number 33, again, this is just a new addition, adding in the Surplus Land Act requirements to that policy. So in terms of more substantive revisions, there's only 2 board policies that are being advanced for review. The first one is Board Policy number 4, relating to the procedure for the conduct of the board's meetings, and then Board Policy number 18, Railroad Crossing Quiet Zones and Wayside Horn Systems. So for Board Policy number 4, Rules of Procedure, there's just 2 things that I wanted to point out here. And again, they're substantive in nature, but they're minor as well in a sense. The first one is just we updated the policy to include details on the availability of live and archived board meetings. We did not have that previously available, so we wanted to make that change in the policy. And then as it related to special meetings, we noticed that the special meeting provision did not align with the government code. There was nothing illegal about the policy. It just would have required us to provide notice to newspapers when the government code does not require that unless the newspaper expressly requests notice in advance. And so we just made that legal update to the policy to align with the government code. So Board Policy number 18, if you've had an opportunity to look at the black line revisions that we provided, it looks very different than it did before, and it's kind of black lined to death, so to speak. That was a complete rewrite of this policy. Some of the background information that we believed was extraneous was removed so that we could get right into the substance of the policy. There's a lot of, most of the policy remained the same in terms of substance, but I did want to point out a few things since the policy is completely rewritten. The first one is the title of the policy. The prior name of the policy related specifically to quiet zones and wayside horn systems. We're proposing that this be changed to railroad safety and community enhancement projects as the title of the policy to be more inclusive of the types of projects that are contemplated along the railroad right-of-way. The more substantive items that you might note is that this revision does amend the policy to provide, as I noted, for the implementation of projects that enhance the quality of life for communities and supports railroad operations. And that is in addition to the quiet zone and wayside horns. That was the sole subject of the prior version of this policy. In addition to that, it does provide for NCTD at its sole discretion to contribute capital funding toward the construction phase of NCTD identified high priority projects that foster increased safety and improved rail operations, bearing in mind that this contribution of capital funding, obviously this is just a policy statement, that any specific direction of the board as it relates to contribution of capital funding would be by way of a separate action of the board. It also identifies who would be considered lead agency, and project management responsibilities are also better defined in the policy. As it relates to the method of memorializing agreement, the construction and maintenance agreement provisions, and the insurance and indemnity provisions of the original policy have remained largely unchanged. So in terms of next steps, assuming that the executive committee approves these proposed modifications today, we will advance these to the October regular meeting of the board for the full board to consider. And there would be an adoption of a resolution approving the proposed modifications. And with the resolution, the proposed modifications would be effective immediately upon adoption. And with that, I'll take any questions from the committee.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate the efforts that went into all of this, and for given that the city of Encinitas has spent almost $25 million on a couple of undercrossings of the railroad tracks, having the opportunity to collaborate with NCTD on some of those costs would have been nice, and I look forward to doing that in the future. So I think that these changes to the policy are going to be well received by the public. And I recognize also, though, that you indicated that ultimately it's a decision that will be made by the board as to whether to have any capital contributions to those projects. So I get all that. But in the meantime, this change in policy is I think, much more sensitive to the impacts of the railroad and transit on communities. So thank you for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I don't know if that means nobody's got questions. Anthony, are there any public speakers on this?
No, sir.
All right.
I don't
So-
have any questions.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I said I do not, just to clarify.
Oh, okay. So we need a motion to move this to the full board, or how are we
what-
handling that?
We can have a motion to advance to the full board, or just the concurrence of the group. I think we can proceed with the motion if that's appropriate.
Okay.
I'll make
I
a
would-
motion to approve the policies as presented.
I would
so the-
second.
On the motion of Board Member Sharon Jenkins, seconded by Vice Chair Joel Edson, to move the board policies forward to the full board for approval. Board Chair Krantz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Edson,
Yes.
PAF Committee Vice Chair Jenkins,
Yes,
Municipal Committee Chair Quirk.
Yes.
Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So that takes us to closed session item, which is item 2. And we will have one item. And it's pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Public Employee Performance Evaluation of Matthew O. Tucker, the Executive Director. You were sent a second Zoom invitation, so with moving into this item, we will end the regular session Zoom and move into the closed session Zoom. And once we're done with closed session, we're going to need to reconnect to the original session. So with that, I will catch up with you in closed session.
okay. Anthony, when did you send the second one?
With the first one.
It was part of the first one, ma'am,
Okay.
to be
Okay,
highlighted in green.
okay, thanks.